Senator Johnson, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Taylor, when you look at the title of the agency you once headed, it's intelligence and analysis. And from my standpoint, the analysis is really all about gathering all that information and then trying to prioritize it so we can adequately address the threats that face this nation. I thought Ms. Patel had a pretty good suggestion that you start with the violence. Pretty good way of prioritizing things. You know, what is the greatest threat magnitude? I mean, how many people could lose their lives? How much damage can be done? I've always thought it was a little strange. The chairman's focusing on white supremacists. Listen, I don't condone them. I condemn white supremacists. I condemn any act of violence. I don't categorize it whether it's right wing, left wing. I condemn violence. But the fact of the matter is we lose 70,000 people a year on drug overdoses. General Taylor, do you have any idea how many deaths, how many murders occur from drug violence, gangs?
I have no numbers, sir, but it's epidemic across.
It's thousands, isn't it?
It is across.
It's thousands. I don't know what the current level of white supremacist killings, but I think it's in the hundreds. Again, condemn it completely, but we're talking about thousands of drug-related murders every year, tens of thousands of drug-related overdoses, and now we're supposed to concentrate on domestic terrorism as the greatest threat. Again, it's not.
Well,
right now, the New York Times reported 160 different nationalities of people being picked up on the southern border over the last couple of months. Ms. Caldwell, would you believe that's somewhat of a threat?
I think that we have to continue to look at the processes by which people are showing up at the border. It is always possible that these networks and routes can be used by those who intend to do us harm.
So when we are clogging up our system with close to 6,000 apprehensions a day, General Taylor, when you were in the administration, we had a humanitarian crisis, according to President Obama, of 2,000 people being apprehended a day. During 2018, 2019, it was a little over 4,000. Last couple of months, it's been 6,000 people per day on average almost. 6,000 people. What happens to our system when it's clogged up with 6,000 people? Doesn't that open up the border to additional drug trafficking? Doesn't that create opportunities for transnational criminal organizations to exploit it? Doesn't that open it up to other human trafficking of, let's call it, higher value targets to get in here that could create acts of violence? I mean, shouldn't we be concentrating on that as opposed to last week? It was surreal in this committee room. Secretary Mayorkas, first of all, blaming the previous administration for the crisis they created, and quite honestly, Senator Peter talking about, oh, it's, the numbers are coming down. We're getting this under control. No, 6,000 people per day, and it's really not being abated at all. Isn't that a threat? Isn't that an enormous threat?
absolutely. And it's a threat that we have to face along with the other threats that come at us from across the globe, from our international, not just partners, but international adversaries. Look, we're, in my view, the myriad of threats facing this country are significant and broad, and not just for the Department of Homeland Security, but for our state and local law enforcement organizations, for the FBI, for the Department of Justice, in a coordinated effort to address.
So again, my point being is we really ought to concentrate on the numbers and the magnitude of the threat. Listen, I condemned what happened here on January 6th, but I condemn as well the more than 500 riots that occurred during the summer, including in Kenosha, Wisconsin. A couple, 2 dozen people murdered, 700 law enforcement officers injured, $2 billion worth of property damaged. Yet we all just want to move beyond that and let's just focus on January 6th.
Sir,
Another thing that really concerns me is we just saw the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack. I don't know if that's a shot across the bow, whether that's a criminal organization getting a little out of control of the Russian handlers and maybe going too far. I don't know what that is, but I do know that no administration, as long as I've been serving here, has taken literally the vulnerability of our electrical grid seriously, not when it comes to potential EMP or GMD or cyber attack. We've seen what's happened now in terms of the vulnerability of the electrical grid to some of this green energy in Texas. In your time, both of you, Ms. Coswell and General Taylor, was DHS INA, were we looking at the vulnerability we are introducing into our infrastructure, like our electrical grid, with some of these green energy ideas? Ms. Cogswell, I'll start with you.
I would say that both during my time with DHS INA and at my time at TSA, which, as you know, has responsibility with relation to pipeline security, cyber was a considerable interest to us. We were focused on what we saw as the greatest potential threats, where their vulnerabilities were, how to work with the owners and operators to conduct assessments and help them improve their basic security pipeline. We didn't select one opportunity threat over the other, but looking at it holistically across the board.
General Taylor.
Critical infrastructure is critically important to the security of our country. 85% of the critical infrastructure in this country sits in private sector hands that makes the decisions about how to protect themselves. The sector coordinating councils that DHS has established over the course of the last 15 years have done yeoman work in working with those.
But, you know, we haven't made any move whatsoever, for example, to purchase and put in place large power transformers that are incredibly vulnerable to either an EMP attack or potentially a GMD event. We haven't done it. We're literally spending trillions of dollars and proposing spending trillions more, and nobody's talking about doing something that prophylactic, that sensible in terms of protecting our infrastructure. Because I'm afraid we're focusing on, you know, domestic terrorism that might kill a couple hundred people a year versus something that could really represent an existential threat. So again, my only point is I think we have politicized the threats we face, and we're not keeping our eye on the ball of the things that really represent a real threat to this nation, which is right now, border security is probably the #1, and we're ignoring that and denying reality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Ossoff, you are recognized for your questions.